Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Project staff, if I could ask you to rename yourselves to identify that you are BPS, I think that would be helpful. Appreciate that. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this information session on the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub Policy Project. I'm Wing Grabowski. I support engagement at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Please note the session is being recorded and it will be posted publicly. The purpose of today's session is to share more detail about the project and answer your questions to help inform your feedback. Staff will present an overview of the project and the alternative proposals. This is not a formal public comment session. While we won't be collecting official comments here, we will make sure that you have access to the formal comment process. We do ask that you hold questions until after the presentation. If you need clarification on any points, please note those down and we can return to the slide and the topic during the Q&A. I do want to note today's session will go until 12:30 today. And with that, I'd like to hand it over to Tom.
Thanks, Wayne. Just a correction, we'll be going till 1:30 today.
Apologies. Thank you, Tom.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tom Armstrong. I'm a supervising planner here at the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, and I use he, him pronouns. And I've been the project manager for this CEI Hub policy project. And I'm going to share my screen here. You will see here on the screen the QR code that is a link to the project website.
Tom, I'm not seeing your screen. Just
To
make sure that's not me. Let
me try again.
It's for everyone.
I'm not seeing it as well.
Well, that is an issue here. Just was sharing a minute ago.
And it does look like you have the ability to share.
Here we go. Let's try this again.
Okay.
There we go.
You can see it. I can see your notes in the sidebar.
Yeah. All right. There we go. All right. So the QR code here on this screen is a link to our website. It has where you can download the discussion draft, and it has links to our comment online comment forms, and also a listing of other public events that you can attend to talk about this project. So for today, as part of this presentation, I'm going to review the project timeline and some background information. I'm going to summarize what we've heard in our community meetings over the last 3 months that sort of helped inform these alternatives. And then I'll give an overview of the alternatives and what's in the discussion draft. And then talk a little bit about next steps, and then we'll open it up for a Q&A session. Again, we started this project back in May, and we've been consulting with various community groups and subject matter experts that have helped inform how we put together these alternatives. And we are at this phase, which we call a discussion draft. And what that means is we are taking public comment and feedback on these alternatives. That public comment and feedback comes to city staff, and it will help inform, we're presenting today a range of alternatives. That feedback will help inform us as we select and revise and put together a proposed alternative, which will be a proposed draft that we will publish in early November. That proposed draft will go to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission will, there'll be further opportunities for public testimony. They'll hold public hearings, and the Planning Commission will deliberate. They can make amendments to the proposed alternative, and eventually they will vote on a recommendation, the recommended draft, early in 2026. And that's the proposal, the recommendation that will go to City Council. And City Council will then take it up with further opportunity for public testimony and amendment. And eventually Council will adopt some version of this in the spring of 2026. So just to make sure everybody's grounded, the Critical Energy Infrastructure Hub, the CEI Hub, is a 6-mile stretch along the Willamette River in Northwest Portland, in the Northwest Industrial District, that sits between Highway 30 and the Willamette River. And along that stretch, there are 11 bulk fuel terminals. These are the tank farms that you see as you drive out Highway 30 to Sobey Island or to the St. John's Bridge. And those bulk fuel terminals have over 600 storage tanks, and with the capacity and ability to store 350 million gallons of fuel. And this is fuel of all types. This is gasoline, this is diesel, this is other lubricants, this is liquefied natural gas as part of Northwest Natural's gas distribution system. A lot of different products and these represent the largest fuel terminals. And the reason that it's located here is that it also has access to key transportation links. The river, the railroad, the Olympic pipeline that comes down from the Puget Sound region and delivers most of our, about 2/3 of our fuel products. The pipeline terminals end in this area. The CEI Hub is a critical piece of infrastructure, not only for Portland, but for the state and the region. About 90% of the liquid fuel that Oregon needs passes through the CEI Hub. There is a smaller pipeline that goes down the Willamette Valley and ends in another distribution terminal in Eugene. And about 70% of the fuel that passes through the CEI Hub is consumed either in the Portland region or the rest of the Willamette Valley. We get a little bit of fuel. Oregon gets a little bit of fuel from other sources, from Idaho, from refineries in Utah that come via pipeline into Washington, by truck from California to serve Southern Oregon. But the bulk of what we need in Oregon comes through the CEI Hub. At the same time, the CEI Hub is located in an area that is at high risk of liquefaction in the event of a major earthquake. This is a map that is produced by the state, DOGAMI, the State Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. I think that's what the I there on the end is. And what you see in red are the areas that are at high risk of liquefaction in a seismic event. And which means liquefaction is think of that as the soil instability and shifting and movement that would occur during an earthquake that could then disrupt and otherwise tilt, cripple the storage tanks that are in the CEI Hub, and then that has increased risk of spills and consequent contamination of the river or fires that could spread to Forest Park or create toxic air quality conditions for the city. So we have a critical piece of infrastructure in a high-risk location, which is what really brings to focus on what is going on and how we manage the CEI Hub. So the purpose of this project is, back in 2016, we started a process to regulate development at these bulk fuel terminals. And this project is to revisit those regulations and the comprehensive plan policies that guide development, and to look at how we can reduce the risk represented by these facilities, support safety upgrades, and continue to provide the fuel that Oregon and the region and Portland needs to support our economy. And so what you'll see today is we're looking at both comprehensive plan policies and additional zoning regulations to regulate these existing terminals. At the same time, we're using this opportunity as we review these options with our agency partners. We are convening other agencies at the local level, the regional level, the state level, and the federal level. Everyone who has a role to play in managing or regulating the activities within the hub, so that we can better coordinate the interagency emergency management efforts. The zoning code itself does not, which BPS manages, and what this project is about, has very little to do with the emergency response that goes on in the hub. But we are using this opportunity as a communications point to try and better understand what each agency is managing, and sort of what the next steps are towards a better emergency management and response effort might be. So what we've heard, we've been talking to 3 different groups of people. We've held quite a few meetings with community groups. I think by far what we've heard is the community is looking to give a higher priority to health and safety outcomes. And it, as touching on that interagency coordination, how can the city help with a more holistic approach of the hub itself? One issue that often comes up is, can we relocate the hub to a safer area? And I will say, 95% of Portland's industrial areas are already in a high risk liquefaction zone. So there's not really a safer place in Portland to relocate these facilities. And therefore that relocation becomes a state issue. And there's been various efforts to look at that at the state level. It will continue to be part of the city's state agenda to try and move forward those efforts. But the city itself cannot we don't have a good place to relocate it in the city, and we don't have authority to move it somewhere else. Some of the things that we've also heard is, that you will see reflected in the alternatives is looking to how can we reduce the capacity of these terminals over time, and that shows up in alternative 4, requiring seismic safety improvements, and we've been coordinating with the state Oregon Department of Environmental Quality's seismic stability program on how we can better require seismic safety improvements at the terminals. And then, eventually, although not part of this project, looking further out as these terminals shrink over time, what comes next? As our need or demand or the transition to a cleaner, especially a cleaner transportation system, where we envision requiring less liquid fuel, then the footprint of these terminals can shrink, and what can we do with that underutilized land? That's a future project that we're not ready to address at this time. In terms of industry, what we've heard from businesses and industry is a need for an economic impact analysis. I think this is particularly true of ensuring that Oregon and the region has access to liquid fuel that it needs to continue our lifestyle and our economy, and to make sure that we're not overly constraining the supply of fuel. And to that point, there's a lot of uncertainty on how fast we are going to transition to a cleaner transportation system, how fast electric vehicles are going to replace gasoline powered vehicles, and just sort of to manage that uncertainty, to have flexibility. And that feeds into a need for some additional capacity from renewables, and especially for sustainable aviation fuel, the SAF or SAF, to be able to help with that transition, to go from fossil fuel to renewable fuel, and then eventually reduce the demand for all liquid fuel over time. The industry is also interested in making sure that we are consistent with the DEQ requirements, and that we're not putting up barriers that would impede their ability to implement those mitigation plans. We have talked to labor unions, and they are supportive of this transition, especially for renewables and SAF, and to requiring the seismic upgrades. All right, let's get into the alternatives. I'm going to give you, this is just a high-level overview, and then I'm going to dive in a little deeper with more details for each of the alternatives. But starting on the left-hand side, the baseline. This is what is the regulations that are in place today. We adopted these back in 2016. It's gone through 3 rounds of legal challenges. Most recently, we adopted them in 2022, but this is what is now in place. We are prohibiting new bulk fossil fuel terminals, and that is defined as any terminal that has more than 2 million gallons of storage capacity and has access to some sort of regional transloading facility, the interstate pipeline, the river, a dock, a rail line, something that it brings that fuel from outside the region into the region to a central point, and then gets distributed out from there. So we've prohibited new ones. We have limited the existing ones to the fossil fuel storage capacity that they had in 2022. So they can't build new fossil fuel storage tanks. That comes with some exceptions. There are exceptions that allow expansion for aviation fuels, primarily because that was the one fuel type that forecasts continue to forecast an increasing demand for over time, and renewable fuels to aid in that transition from fossil to renewable, and then eventually to shrink our demand for liquid fuels as we transition to electric vehicles over time. It also allows for the repair and replacement and what we call reconfiguration of existing tanks. This speaks to the seismic upgrades that DEQ is going to require. Newer tanks are safer than the older tanks, and so we want to support the terminals to replace those tanks, maintain them up to current code standards, and at the same time, as the market changes and to sort of deal with that uncertainty in the transition, they can reconfigure or consolidate tanks. They can take a bunch of small tanks and make them a big tank. It's just that the overall capacity of the terminal can't increase, except for the exceptions that are listed out. That's our starting point. There is no limit on the amount of expansion that can be done for, under these exceptions, primarily for aviation and renewable fuels. So the first alternative looks at primarily how do we limit fossil fuel transloading. So current regulations regulate storage tank capacity, but we don't regulate the pipes and the connections that move that fuel through the system. And so alternative one begins to look at and limit no expansion of that fossil fuel transloading capacity. It doesn't limit the amount of expansion for aviation and renewable fuels, but it proposes that we have a conditional use process with some approval criteria, discretionary approval criteria that ensures that the new tanks or the new systems for the aviation or renewable fuels are, for example, located on the safest part of the site, or others. If we get a lot of feedback to go with this alternative, we will develop that approval criteria and spell that out in the proposed alternative. Alternative two builds on that in a way that instead of that discretionary conditional use review process for expanding for renewables, we take a simpler approach and we limit that expansion and say, each terminal can expand their capacity by 5% for renewables or aviation purposes. They get to decide how they want to use that, with an important caveat that two things: any expansion and any new tanks, even sort of repair and replacement, has to be built to what is called risk category 4, the highest standard of seismic code, in order to withstand a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. And then the other important thing is the whole facility itself must have what is called full containment. That is, if in the event of an earthquake, if the facility fails, or if you have multiple tank failures, that there is a wall or a berm around the facility that can contain all of that liquid, and that it doesn't, ooze into the river and pollute the river. So that is alternative 2. Alternative 3 just prohibits all expansions. It essentially takes away the current exceptions for aviation and renewable fuels, and limits new transloading capacity, but allows the terminals to continue to use what they have, the capacity that they have on the ground today. They can replace it, they can reconfigure it, they can use it for different fuel types, but you can't expand. And then alternative 4 takes that a step further and says, not only can you not expand, but by 2035, you have to reduce your capacity by 17%. And we came up with the 17% based on the latest federal fuel demand forecasts that go out to 2035. 2035 also is a good approximation of the 10-year timeline that the DEQ seismic stability program has for implementation of their mitigation plans. And so that terminals can plan at the same time, how they're going to reduce that capacity over the next 10 years, and which tanks and how their facility is going to be seismically stable by the 10-year implementation timeframe for the risk mitigation plans. All right, let's try this again. Again, just going through each of the alternatives. Again, these alternatives are designed to build on each other, and each one, and they sort of increase in the level of restriction on the terminals themselves. So again, with alternative 1, we're primarily limiting new fossil fuel transloading infrastructure. So no new offloading racks, no new connections to docks for fossil fuel purposes. We are requiring that the new storage tanks be built to this risk category 4 safety standard, and that any proposal to expand for renewable or aviation fuel would come with a conditional review process, and that involves public notice, an opportunity for public comment, a land use decision that is appealable through our land use system, and so that brings additional scrutiny on those expansion proposals. Alternative 2, primarily, it carries over that prohibition on new fossil fuel transloading infrastructure. But instead of a discretionary review process for expansion for renewable and aviation fuel, it just has a strict cap. From bringing it down from unlimited expansions to a 5%. You look at the existing storage capacity at the facility, and they can add 5%. The terminal can decide, is that for renewable fuel or aviation fuel? So they have that flexibility there. And again, in order to be eligible for that expansion, you have to have a facility-wide full containment is required. Right now, the containment standard is that you only have to contain the single largest tank. The current regulations at the state and federal level do not envision a Cascadia subduction zone where we're going to have multiple tank failures at a given facility. And in addition to that, we're bringing in this requirement that all new storage tanks have to have ground improvement. And what that means is not only structurally, think of the above ground storage tank, structurally that has to meet the highest safety code, but the ground that it sits on has to be improved for seismic purposes. And that could be pilings, that could be injecting concrete or grout into the ground, something that improves the stability of the soil that those tanks are sitting on. So alternative 3, we take away those exceptions. There is no new expansion of storage capacity for all types of fuels at these terminals. The existing storage tank capacity can be reconfigured, but it also has to meet all of those other safety standards. The risk category 4, the ground improvement, the full containment are there, but those will only get triggered in the event of basically replacement, and that's why the city's regulations would sort of be a backup and help inform the DEQ risk management, risk mitigation plans. And then finally, alternative 4 builds on alternative 3, prohibits expansion, and then requires this drawdown, 17% drawdown of storage capacity by 2035. Again, the terminals have the flexibility. They get to choose which tanks they want to take out of service. They can decide what fuel types they want to continue to use. But we're saying, you need to be smaller, and you need to factor that into your risk mitigation plans as you make those improvements over the next 10 years. In terms of comprehensive plan policies, there are 2 sort of key packages in here. The first one is we have an existing policy, 648, that directs us to limit fossil fuel distribution and storage facilities and necessary to serve the regional market. We are proposing to make some changes there. It depends on which alternative you're looking at, but some of the key changes are, it could be limit or restrict, as in especially with alternative 4. And we're deleting the word fossil out of this and recognizing bulk fuel storage, trying to treat all fuels in a similar fashion. And that we are deleting the reference to those necessary to serve the regional market. We, in our numerous legal challenges and for the existing regulations, it's very difficult to determine what is the regional market. This, again, going back to these terminals in the CEI Hub, they serve the entire state of Oregon. They serve parts of Southwest Washington. They serve parts of Eastern Washington. Some of the fuel even gets barged up the Snake River to Idaho. So it's really hard to sort of determine what is the regional market. And so we're proposing to just say, we're going to limit or restrict bulk fuel distribution facilities in Portland in the name of safety. The other bundle of policies that we've come up with, and this again came from some of our community conversations, is to have a set of policies that are really focused on what's going on in that CEI Hub geography, that 6-mile stretch along the river, along Highway 30, and these policies would apply to them. It provides further specificity on the types of activities that should occur at these bulk fuel terminals. And they touch on a number of issues, including seismic upgrades, environmental protection, watershed protection, direction for interagency coordination, and again, sort of supporting that transition to a lower carbon economy that over time will shrink the need for the CEI Hub itself. All right, I'm just about to wrap up here and get to our Q&A session. This is the first public event in our outreach period here. We will be at an event called Rumble on the River tomorrow night at the Lloyd Center. We will be having a public open house next week. We will have another virtual information session in the evening. We are partnering with Willamette Riverkeeper to offer an additional evening webinar. And then finally, public comments are due by October 17th. And then after that, we will consider all those public comments. We will look at the range of alternatives. We'll make refinements, and we will come up with a proposed alternative that we will publish in a proposed draft on November 10th. And that's what will go to the Planning Commission in December. And there'll be a whole nother round of public hearings and public testimony. Again, this is the QR code that takes you to our project website. The web address is there down below, and where you can find all of the information, the discussion draft, the detailed information on all of those public events, where to find us, the link to the public comment page. And I encourage you all to use those resources to make some informed comment to us. I'm going to stop sharing now, and we can transition to a Q&A session.
Great, thank you, Tom. We now have time for Q&A. We will go until 1:30 today. Thank you for that correction. And again, this time is meant to clarify information and answer questions to inform you and to inform your formal comments on the discussion draft. You can submit your formal comments via the Project Map app that can be found if you follow the link provided in the chat and the QR code. That is a link to the project website. You can follow that to the project to the project in the Map app. Please raise your virtual hand if you have a question. I'll call on you in the order that they're raised. I'll then ask you to come off mute to ask your question. To raise your virtual hand, if you're on a computer screen, click the reactions button at the bottom, then choose raise hand. On a phone, tap the three dots, which is the more button or the menu button, then select raise hand. On an iPad, tap reactions at the top right, then choose raise hand. I'll drop those instructions in the chat as well. Great. Daniel, I see your hand raised. Go ahead and come off mute.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, Tom. Dan Eisenbeis with the Port of Portland. Question in regards to the draft proposed CEI Hub policies. I think it was in policy 3, you referenced protection of air quality. Does BPS envision protection of air quality being in regards to air quality citywide or only within the CEI hub? And the reason that I ask is, as you know, renewable fuels often burn cleaner than fossil fuels and provide air quality benefits at the point of use.
Yeah, good question, Dan. I think that the air quality would be, how would be specific to the CI hub, and especially how do land use regulation decisions that we make in the CI hub help support or improve air quality. And so the point that you make about renewables and renewable aviation fuel, its usage, cleaner burning, and not only in terms of carbon, but other pollutants in particular, that we would have to weigh that versus, say, expanded fuel storage that, sort of would burn unregulated in the event of a disaster, and what that impact to air quality might mean. But it would be specific to land use actions in the hub itself.
Terry, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, just a quick question. Is seismic disaster the only disaster that we're talking about here, or are smaller fires, smaller emergencies, and emergency responses part of this, I don't know, scope, if you want to? That's the gist of the question. I'm not sure I'm asking it correctly.
Yeah. I would say that the seismic event is the primary focus, right? That's the one that is going to impact all of the terminals at once, and so we are focused on that. I think in terms of what we can do to make the facility safer will help with the smaller events. But that sort of emergency management, emergency response is a bit beyond the focus of the scope of this project. But as I said, we are working with our other agency partners and the Portland Bureau of Emergency Management to help better address those other events, such as a fire, say, in Forest Park, and how that might threaten and lead to a larger disaster at these terminals. Does anyone have any questions about the comment process or how to access the map app to submit your comments? You can both enter your comments directly into the website, or you can attach a document, a Word document or a PDF that we can help with that.
I see Charisse. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, that's correct. Thank you. I'm interested in if there's analysis of how each of these alternatives relate to our climate goals, like the climate emergency work plan goals, getting us to those goals, or or if this kind of is, so yeah, is there a communication there of like how this helps us toward our climate goals or not?
Yeah, I think that is sort of the key policy question, and the key thing that we're trying to figure out is, especially when it comes to renewables and sustainable aviation fuel, is what is the demand for those fuels over time, and the key question is, do the terminals need additional capacity sort of in the short term to help with this transition to either more renewables or eventually a shrinkage, what we expect to see, a shrinkage in demand for liquid fuels over time. And so that really that key question is, right now we allow unlimited expansion for renewables and aviation fuel. And then each of those alternatives begins to put some restrictions on that ability to expand to meet those needs. And so really the key question is, in order to facilitate that transition, do we need additional capacity, especially in the short term? Like once we get beyond 2035 and into the out years towards 2050, we expect a big shrinkage in the demand for liquid fuels, and therefore a less need for these terminals. But in the short term, what we're hearing is that the demand, the system is still needs the fossil fuel capacity that we have. And oh, by the way, if we want to do this interim transition to renewable fuel, we need to build some additional capacity to get those renewables online, to get us over the hump before we see a real shrinkage especially for the demand for gasoline. And I think you see that in cases like for sustainable aviation fuel. Right now, the federal requirement is that sustainable aviation fuel can be mixed with regular jet fuel up to a 50-50 blend. And what we're hearing from industry is that, well, we need some new storage tanks to store that sustainable aviation fuel in order to just mix it. And we need some blending tanks for that mixed group, because we have to continue to segregate the jet fuel, the regular jet fuel, from the 50-50 blend. And so they're saying that if we want to do that transition and support use of sustainable aviation fuel in the short term, we're going to need some more capacity. In the long term, that capacity may not be needed. And so again, that's the key question, is how much of that capacity do you need to get there before the whole system has a lot of capacity, because we've reduced our demand for liquid fuels. Does that make sense? Okay. And I think what you see that is reflected in the alternatives, especially alternatives 2, 3, and 4. So 2 puts a cap, a 5% cap. We're going to allow you to expand by a little bit to facilitate that transition. Alternative 3 says, you know what, we're just going to let you keep what you have today. We think you might have enough of the existing capacity, and that you can reconfigure that to manage that transition. And then alternative 4 says, you know what, by the time we get to 2035, that demand curve for liquid fuel is going to be dropping. We're going to have a lot of excess capacity in the system. You need to start taking some of that offline and out of service. And so it all depends on your view of what's needed to get us through that transition, and how much renewable fuel capacity do we need to add to the system before we get on the backside of that demand curve. All right, if there are no other questions, we might end this one early. And I would encourage everyone to come to one of our events as you think about this and dig deeper into the discussion draft. And come to one of our online webinars next week as you think about that. You can in fact submit multiple pieces of comment through our online comment form. So as new issues or questions come up, or thoughts or positions, or you can see all of the comments on there that get submitted. And if you want to react to some of those comments, say, yes, I like this, or reinforce a point, or ask a question like, I don't understand this, or I don't think the world works this way. You can do that on the comment forms. Yes, Charisse.
Yeah, quick question. Thanks for the presentation today. And for people who weren't here, is the PowerPoint going to be available somewhere on the info session page or somewhere else that we can access later?
Yeah, each of these events has their own page on our website, and that's where we'll post the recording, and we'll post the slide deck as well.
Great, thank you, Tom. And I understand comments can be made until October 17th.
That is
through
correct.
the link that we provided. Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I think we will close early. I appreciate you all. Enjoy the rest of your days.
All right. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you.